Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to today's New Zealand Food and Grocery Council webinar with the Commerce Commission. We are going to start with a karakia, so I will hand over to Alice from the Commerce Commission for that now. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Raewyn. Ahi ahi Māori e koutou. Te taua mai runga, te taua mai raro, te taua mai roto, te taua mai wahu. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, kia tau ai te Māori ora, tutua whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. And that translates as come forth from above, from below, from within, and from the environment outside, vitality and well-being for all, strengthened in unity. Thanks, Raewyn.
Kia ora, Alice. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the webinar today on the Wholesale Supply Inquiry. We are very pleased again to have a range of speakers from the Commerce Commission with us today for the next hour or so. We have Pierre van Heerden, the Grocery Commissioner, and from the team we have Alice Hume, Laura Furneaux and Mark Worsley. Some will be presenting today and others will be assisting with questions, but we do want to acknowledge all of the effort that's gone in from the team at the Commerce Commission to this important mahi and to the presentation today. It is a very important issue that we are here to discuss today, and as the industry association that represents manufacturers, suppliers and supporters behind New Zealand's food, beverage and grocery brands, we take our role very seriously as making sure that we can advocate on behalf of our members and the supplier community and make sure that regulation that's being contemplated by government and government departments is as well informed as it possibly can be. Now, earlier this week, we were advised that the submission period for this particular consultation has been extended, and we now have until the 1st of August to complete our submission. So we are very pleased to be able to have this webinar with the Commission a couple of weeks ahead of that closing date and have the opportunity to learn more about the proposals, which it's fair to say have landed with a high degree of concern in the industry as to what they may actually end up meaning for the industry, and some confusion around how they will work. So we want to go into this and really hear the explanation from the Commerce Commission and allow questions to come through, which you can put in the chat. You can send them through to me on my mobile phone and through email, and I will have them placed anonymously into the chat if you'd prefer to do that. We have also checked with the Commerce Commission team that we can go over the hour for today, and we understand if attendees have to sign off and go to the next meetings, but the recording will continue and you can catch up on it later. So we're very grateful again to the Commission to extending that time if needs be, as it was for yesterday's seminar webinar. We did require that extra time. So it will be very useful to hear questions and have discussion with the team after the presentation and see where that leaves us for developing our submission. And with no further ado, I would now like to hand over to Pierre to introduce his team more formally and to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks again to Raewyn, the FGC board, and for all the suppliers who have logged in to this webinar. We had a webinar yesterday as well on the supply code, and today we want to cover the wholesale inquiry. What we're looking at doing is covering the background, the wholesale process, supply inquiry process that we went through, the preliminary findings, and then just re-emphasizing the fact that we are seeking submissions on this, and then we'll open for questions. So I have with me today Dr. Alice Hume, our Head of Grocery, who you've heard from in the karakia, Laura Furneaux, our Manager of Grocery Compliance, Mark Worsley, he's our Chief Legal Counsel for Market Regulation, and Annabelle will be running the slides for us. As we go through, please make sure that you note down your questions because we'd love to hear from you. So a little bit more about the background to the legislation. As you know, that one of the things that we look at in terms of the Grocery Competition Act is the access that supermarkets, especially newer and smaller ones or potential ones coming into the market, the access they have to grocery supply. Every potential or current small supplier that I speak to, it's practically the first thing they raise with me and say, how do we get supply of groceries at a competitive price? So it is something which was covered in the review that was done initially in the market study, and we wanted to look at that a little bit closer. So the grocery regulation requires that the regulated retailers, which is Foodstuffs, North Island, South Island, and Woolworths, all have wholesale offers so that other wholesale customers can buy off them. And this was put in place in terms of the legislation to give an alternative to direct supply. Direct supply is something which worldwide is still the one avenue that is most preferred by larger retailers. But to have a wholesale offering is important for those that are smaller. So that's why the Act has this in place. The Act also provides for additional regulation to come into play if a competitive wholesale market is not consistent with other markets that are competitive. So 1 year into the regime, we took a look and saw that there were issues with the wholesale as it stood, and that is why we undertook the Wholesale Supply Inquiry. The Act does provide for additional regulation, and that comes in where it's necessary or desirable, and especially where the wholesale offerings aren't consistent with what would be found in a competitive market. So it's important as we go through this to also bear in mind that these are what we call the backstops, the additional regulation. And Laura will run through the process and the findings now, but I just want to highlight the fact that what we are doing is we are saying that we are giving industry an opportunity to fix this before these backstops come into play. But Laura, I'll hand over to you now to talk through the process and also the preliminary findings.
Thanks, Pierre. We can move on to the next slide. Yeah, great, thank you. As Pierre mentioned, this process is essentially come from the new legislation coming in, our progress assessment of what changes have occurred and how that's been implemented since that came in. And we made the decision to commence an inquiry in September last year. We put out terms of reference for the inquiry at the start of September, and we set out what we considered to be the issues in a preliminary issues paper on 24th of September last year. We invited submissions on those issues, which closed on 8th November. We also ran a cross submissions process and then considered all of that information as well as gathering information from other sources to develop our preliminary findings that we've released at the start of June. So today, as Pierre mentioned, we're partway through submissions on those preliminary findings. We're very much open to views and ideas to help inform the next stages of the inquiry. Perhaps if we, yeah, thank you. So initially we had planned to complete the inquiry this year, but we've actually, as part of those preliminary findings, decided to push that timeframe out till next year to allow a period to, I guess, respond and meet the expectations that we've set out there about how wholesale supply should be working. If we, while I said we've pushed that out for a year, if we're not seeing changes or seeing a response to this, we could actually bring things forward. So really, I guess at this stage, this submission process is really important because we want to hear from you and we want to really shape and inform what happens next and think about the timeline. As Pierre said, the additional regulation is kind of at this stage it's up in the air. We're waiting to hear back from you and respond to the concerns that we've been highlighting and potential ways forward. So as I said, there was a period of information gathering. We have talked to over 60 stakeholders during that process to help inform our preliminary findings paper. We also requested and received a large volume of information, which we have reflected in that paper. The preliminary findings paper sets out the role of the wholesale regulatory regime, so what the rules are that are in place and what the Act provides for, our preliminary findings about the wholesale market currently, our expectations about what needs to change to deliver a competitive wholesale market, and our thoughts on options for delivering that change. But again, we're very open to views around that. Next slide, thanks. So just talking about some of the problems that we've identified with the status quo. So access to competitive and cost-effective pricing. So we've found, looking at the wholesale prices currently available for a considerable number of products, we don't think those competitors, like Pierre mentioned, that were looking to compete with the large major supermarkets could rely on the wholesale access as it is currently to compete with the regulated grocery retailers' own banners. Related to that, we've also identified the large scale of rebates, discounts and payments that are being agreed. And on that point, the issue that we have here is that those agreements that are available to the major supermarkets aren't available to other retailers, and we understand there's reasons behind that, but it does make competition, it does create a real challenge for the price in competition. So we're looking for options to address that issue. We also found significant gaps in the range of products that are being offered by the regulated grocery retailers and their wholesale offers. And then we also found that there could be gaps trying to purchase those directly as well. We also identified some issues specifically around the wholesale offers of the retailers and how easy they were to use. In particular, the minimum order quantities was identified as a barrier for some wholesale customers. So our preliminary view is that we do have sufficient evidence to impose or recommend additional regulation. So we consider that because the wholesale offers that the retailers are making currently have some shortcomings, they're not materially contributing to the purpose of the regime. And we also don't think that those offers are consistent with what we would expect in a competitive wholesale market. However, as we've already highlighted, at this stage, we consider that there's a real opportunity for parties to change behaviour and to change the market yourselves. There's an opportunity without us having to introduce further regulation. But this would require some changes both from the retailers and from suppliers if this approach to wholesale access is to work. So we've just noted down there is a lot of information in the preliminary findings paper. This is just a very, I guess, high-level summary. So in that paper, we have highlighted some expectations. Again, you can comment on these expectations, or we're very interested in the response to these expectations and understanding what the industry thinks it can do. So we've kind of separated these into expectations of the regulated grocery retailers. So these are to provide sharper pricing of products in their wholesale offers by either negotiating pass-through of additional promotional funding to wholesale customers. Sorry, that's not an either. And establishing a mechanism to give suppliers assurance that promotional funding is being passed to the retail consumers. So we understand that that's a concern and a barrier. So we think that the retailers really need to look at that concern and come up with some solutions. Also to expand the product ranges of their wholesale offers to include more of the products that wholesale customers and consumers are demanding, including all the product categories and lower price products as well, like private label products or generic equivalents. Sorry, just jump back a little bit more. So there could be a comprehensive range of wholesale offers, just not in terms of representing all the product categories for which there is demand. Within each category, there should be a variety and a range of products with different price points as a really key point. And wholesale offers should include products that are supplied directly to other retailers by suppliers using their own distribution channels, as this would pass on scale benefits of the RGRs. Okay, next slide, thank you. So in terms of expectations for suppliers, so I guess we're putting it to you how to develop ways to limit price discrimination and increase the access to range for competitors to these major grocery retailers. And so this could be through direct supply, offering lower net prices to wholesale customers. When we say wholesale customers, it's the people that are seeking out these offers. And through your direct supply relationships, or offering promotional funding directly. Could be through working with the regulated grocery retailers to reduce the prevalence of promotional funding in favour of average pricing. So there's not such a big difference between, I guess, the funding and the offers that the retailers are able to make and the offers that their competitors are able to make. And through the wholesale regime specifically, ways to address this issue could be through enabling the retailers to make offers that include enhanced promotional funding. So as per the last slide, once the retailers think about ways that they could address the concerns, to I guess work with them on those, and to support the regulated grocery retailers in providing a comprehensive range of products at volumes required to meet consumers' demands, by allowing those the supplier's most purchased products to be included in the wholesale offers. So our preliminary findings paper looks, we're looking across the board, but we also have a focus on what the customers or what the competitors need to be competitive. What products are they looking for? We do acknowledge there's an overlap here with the review of the grocery supply code, and that's one of the reasons that we released the two papers together. So the grocery supply code sets rules about the ways that the regulated grocery retailers, those same three retailers, deal with their suppliers, including the payments that they can require from suppliers. Overall, we're seeking to make the code and the interactions between regulated grocery retailers and suppliers less complex, which we think is also relevant to these issues around wholesale supply and what can be offered to them versus other competitors. We are also proposing to develop guidance and set reporting requirements to help address potential pressure to agree to payments to retailers. So if you're not already familiar with the review, we encourage you to have a look at those proposals on our website. It's already been mentioned, we held the webinar yesterday, and there's will be a recording of that webinar made available. You can also contact us directly. The grocery supply code consultation closes next Friday, 18th of July. That is a hard deadline because we do have statutory requirements to report to the Minister by the end of September. So we are seeking submissions on that process by next Friday. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Alice to talk about submissions some more.
Thanks, Laura. So yes, as you see, we're very keen to understand your point of view about the position that we've taken. So we're really keen to hear feedback. So obviously, I assume that we'll get some in this meeting in the form of questions. But you know, it would be really great to have written submissions as part of our process, and things that we're particularly interested in your views on are what needs to change if we're going to deliver a competitive wholesale market. As we've discussed in this presentation, that's going to be key to unlocking competition in the sector. It's not something that we can do in isolation from Wellington. We need the whole sector to work together to deliver that. So, you know, we're really keen to hear your insights on that. We really want to know what you think about the expectations we've set out in our paper. We know it's a big ask, and it's not easy, but we genuinely believe that it would be beneficial to you, for you to be part of offering up a solution than for us to step in over the top without giving you the opportunity to do that. So we're keen to understand what you think about that, and also what you think the options are for delivering that change. The other thing I'd just highlight about submissions is if we have written submissions, then they will be part of our cross-submission process. And I think one of the things that we've seen in previous submission processes that we've run is that the cross submissions are really the interesting part, and that's where you get to see what other people have said, and then that can trigger other thoughts, and you can then comment on those. So the more written submissions that we have in that first round, I think the better quality dialogue we then have in cross submissions. So as Laura says, we've extended the deadline for submissions on this paper until the 1st of August, and there are lots of ways that you can submit. So you can put your name to something and send it directly to us at the grocery email address. If you'd still like to provide something written but want to stay anonymous entirely, then that's also an option. And obviously, FGC, I assume, will be putting together a submission, and so you can contribute to that as well. And it may be that you make different decisions at different rounds, so you might choose not to submit in the initial submission, but then to do a cross submission. All of those things are welcome. If it's something that you feel strongly about, or feel that you've got something to tell us that you think that we might not be understanding, then we're really keen to hear from you. So thank you for that. That's how to submit, and I think we're over to you to see us through the Q&A. Thanks, Raewyn.
Thank you very much, Alice, Pierre and Laura, for the presentation. That's a very helpful start to the dialogue that we can now have. I guess I thought I would start by reminding members and the wider supplier community about the thrust of the submissions that the New Zealand Food and Grocery Council have made to date. As you've heard from the Commission, there have been rounds of submissions already last year, and we did submit and cross-submit in those. We were very keen to make sure that the option for suppliers to decide whether they would participate in the wholesale regime or not was preserved. And that's a very important principle that we feel strongly that the businesses who invest and take risk in the market should be able to make choices about how their businesses interact with different retailers and have direct control over that. And that becomes even more important when there is promotional investment that is generally expected to be associated with a direct return on that investment, that it's entirely reasonable in our view that suppliers would be able to have that dialogue directly with the retailers rather than having a pass through the regulated grocery retailers already in the market in a dominant way. So we've submitted on that already, and we will continue, I guess, to make that point. We have also been aware from the outset, from when the bill was first proposed, that this wholesale regime is a novel approach, that we can't look at overseas markets and take advice or examples of where it's working well, and that makes it difficult for all of us to, I guess, have real confidence in the fact that it can work to overcome the unique challenges that we have here. So we are aware of that, and we also are, of course, aware that there is other activity at a government level with the request for information and the seeking of advice on structural separation, which causes a lot of uncertainty for our sector. And the timing of making a submission ahead of knowing exactly what the government's intentions on that is a difficulty. And then I guess the request, which you are making very genuinely, to try and get the sector to work together to deliver the outcome that you as public servants are charged with delivering through the legislation at a time when the uncertainty is there. That's a very commercially risky enterprise for businesses to go into a voluntary approach in the face of an uncertain future. So those are all complicating factors that none of us have complete control over, and we all have jobs to do. So with all due respect, I guess we have to navigate what we'll do in these circumstances. But that was my opening gambit, and we now do have some questions which I think are going to start popping up in the chat. And I apologise if I look like I'm slightly distracted while we go through this process, because the questions are coming into my phone, so I need to be able to pop them in the chat as we go through. So I guess I can't see any of those populated in my screen yet, but I will just go to my phone and start reading them, and they will no doubt come through. The first question: how are we supposed to offer lower net prices without the volume if we introduce that middle person through the wholesale supply scheme? Are we not creating an Australian IGA situation? So quite a specific question, but if you'd like to have a think about how to respond.
Yes, look, cost to serve is always going to be in there. And the middleman in there as the RGR as a wholesaler, there are costs associated with that. However, most people that I speak to try and buy the groceries will tell me that there's a 15% plus differential, and that doesn't come about because of the RGR's costs. It all comes back to the promotional spend. And as Raewyn said, that is something which we recognise the suppliers want to control their investment. When I look at Australia, in Metcash, they've been able to get a situation where that is controlled and workable. So even though we don't have a exactly similar wholesale regime, there is Metcash that can give some indication. I also want to stress that further regulation is our last resort. Our preference is to get to a commercial solution that avoids the need for further regulation. And remember that it's not only wholesale, but there's direct supply as well. Because that's one thing that people who want to come into the market say to me, is that the duopoly is actually being supported by suppliers to remain there because of the way the industry operates. And what we are just saying here is there are two ways to get supply to new entrants or to existing smaller players, and that is either wholesale or direct supply. I know that many of the suppliers have actually gone direct and are working directly with various smaller supermarkets and others who come into the market. So we just want to encourage you that the focus has maybe been too narrowly on what further legislation or regulation will do and the consequences, rather than what we are calling for, and that's action to get a commercial solution.
Thank you. We have a number of other questions now available in the chat. So another one is, could you please ask anonymously if the ComCom could share the evidence modelling that has led them to the conclusion that this model will result in lower prices for consumers?
Well, at the end of the day, when you're talking to other supermarkets and smaller supermarkets, they tell you that they're paying 15% more than they can if they go and buy out of one of the larger retailers. There's a problem there. There's a price differential. So our evidence is that these people who are trying to get into the market are telling us that they can't buy cost effectively. And there are some suppliers that they will indicate to us they are working with and they are getting better prices. But the issue that they often raise with me is that there are two different sections in a supplier. The one is the food service section and the other one is the retail. And those two don't talk together. So I've been told by a few that they go and call up to buy pallet loads full. So we're not talking, 6 of this and 6 of that, but they want to buy pallet loads and they are sent through to food service. But when they say, but hang on, the price you're giving me is way more than I can buy even off the regulated wholesale regime, food service don't even know about that. So I'd encourage the suppliers that internally as well, you let your different teams know how this operates, because that's the way we're going to get better competition in the market, is to get others who can offer competitive pricing.
Yeah, can I come in on this question as well, please?
Sure.
So I think, not disagreeing with what you've said, but in terms of the specific evidence and modelling to support the position that we've taken. I mean, this is part of our ask to you, because we've taken the position that you are more likely to be part of a cost-effective solution than us imposing a regulatory solution. And so that's part of the evidence base that we're seeking to support that position. It's clear from the analysis that we've done, as Pierre talked about, that the promotional spend isn't flowing through, and that's making a significant difference in pricing. But it's not just about pricing; it's also about range that's available through that those wholesale offers. And we're not going to grow any further wholesale capacity if that range isn't available that people want to buy. And so that's the other aspect of that issue that we need to crack.
Thank you. I'll keep going through the questions rather than get into a debate about some of the responses, because this is really important to surface the issues and we have the opportunity to submit down the track. So the next question, the biggest concern we have is passing through promotional funding into a wholesale offer, but not having any mechanism to see that funding being honoured in promo retail pricing with small independent retailers. Could suppliers enforce a maximum promo retail?
Look, in terms of that, we recognise that you're investing and you want to see a return on your investment, and that in fact goes through to the consumer. Again, I refer to Metcash in Australia, where they have put mechanisms in place and suppliers are operating with that. We've spoken to Metcash and they say it's working. So what we're saying to the industry is, you know how the industry works. Look at a solution to this. Work with the wholesalers or go direct. I've spoken to a number of smaller supermarkets where you are dealing directly with them and saying, we will give you X% more. And I know some of the big suppliers have spoken to me as well and said that they are allocating their trade spend more equitably across the board now. So I think there are solutions, and that's why we are saying to the industry, you know your industry well, help us and get to the solution rather than us having to use the backstops.
Thank you. The next question, if the goal is better outcomes for consumers, how will the Commission measure success, and what happens if this increases costs or reduces product availability instead?
Well, success is a more competitive market, and that is what we're aiming for. We measure that. Annual grocery report, which is coming out shortly, looks at that every year, and it shines a light on the industry to see what the competition is like. If competitive prices are being offered by others, there'll be a bigger spread of consumers buying off other entities as well, smaller supermarkets or new entrants. So competition is the measure.
Thank you. The next question, can one regulated grocery retailer purchase stock from another RGR's wholesale business? If so, that would potentially get interesting if it was an all-included, all discounts reflected pricing by price. Do you have any comment on that for us?
I'll ask Alice to respond as well, but I'm not aware of anyone approaching the other to buy off them at this point in time. Remember, you can't just pitch up at the door and say, I want stock. Their accounts having to be opened, etc. And I honestly do not see that happening, because we get notified of all the applicants and who all have accounts. And if we see any type of collusion included in that, we will definitely take action.
Pierre, just to jump in, I guess legally speaking, the essentially the system applies to wholesale customers, or the regime applies to wholesale customers. So I guess in purely sort of technical legal terms, an RGR could be a wholesale customer, of another RGR. So it's, in terms of the regime as it currently is, it's possible. I mean, as you said, it's something we could keep an eye on, and it might never happen.
Yes, I think someone is really asking for your comment, not suggesting it would happen, but just wanting to clarify how it'll work. So it's useful to hear the different responses from you. Thank you very much. The next one is, what do the Commission see as the implications for suppliers if promotional funding must be passed through, essentially subject to regulatory intervention? So I guess that's asking, have you thought through how that will affect suppliers if they were regulated in that way?
Look, again, we haven't come to implementing further regulation at this stage. We are saying, the system isn't working the way it was intended to. Our call is for you to come up with a solution. Should we get down to a further regulation, there'll be submissions and cross submissions on those, and we will consider all of those aspects at that point in time as well.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Pierre, I can maybe just add in again, just from the legal perspective. So the Act does require us to assess the benefits of applying different types of additional regulation, and also consider what would be the most cost-effective types of regulation. So, as Pierre said, essentially we've reached preliminary views on the state of the market, but we haven't gone to the extent of actually looking at the different forms of regulation and how we might consider applying that or recommending it be applied by government.
I think the other thing that I'd highlight here is the link to the proposed amendments to the supply code and simplification of the promotional payments environment. And so we'd hope it would be a lot clearer around which promotions you would look to pass on. And so don't forget that there's that aspect of this as well. And we are keen to hear how the two sets of proposals might work together, or if there's any concerns around that.
Especially around the investment buying, which we are saying in the supply code we want to see stopped.
Thank you. Another question here, how do you reconcile the Commission's push for mandatory supplier participation with the Act's principle of supplier control over distribution?
Well, firstly, we haven't come to that point yet. As I've made clear, we are making a call to the industry to fix this first. That is our preference, because at the moment, I think we focus too narrowly on the regulations and the consequences rather than what the purpose of the Act is. You've always got to come back to the purpose of the Act as well. But at the end of the day, again, I think it's premature to bring that in right now when we are basically saying we are waiting on industry for a proposal now to fix this.
I guess, Pierre, to comment in response to that, I think that may be difficult for the supplier community to understand, given the wording of the report has said that we have reached the threshold in your view, and we could go to that now, but we are giving you, in essence, a chance to do it voluntarily. But if we don't see that action, we will, at either the 12-month point or before that, move to this. There doesn't seem to be the same level of wriggle room expressed in the written word. And of course, these people are running businesses and are very concerned about margins and the pressure that they're under in a tough economic environment, in an uncertain environment that's been regulated incrementally over the last few years, and having come off the back of COVID, supply chain issues, all of those things. I think it's reasonable for them to be alarmed that this could happen and to take it seriously. And I think you're seeing that reaction in the sentiment of the questions, that there is a perception that this really is do it now or it will be done to you. If that's not the intention, we may need to see some different wording or see some assurance that that's not as closed as that. But I think you're feeling the real concern coming through in the questions.
We certainly recognise that, but what we're also saying is if it comes to that point, regulations won't just be imposed. It will go through the normal process where there are drafts put out and there are submissions and cross-submissions.
Yes, I also remind members that, but I guess if you're outside of that process, sometimes you don't always have confidence that the views will be heard at that point. So we'll carry on with the questions, but I think it's good to recognise these are genuine concerns, not criticism of the thinking.
If I could just add to that as well, direct supply is still the option that's in there as well. So let's not forget about that. If these other supermarkets or people who are coming into market, wanting to come into market or grow, get direct supply, we see all of that. So it's not only about wholesale. I think if you look at the Act as well, there's wholesale, but there is direct, which effectively is the one that most bigger supermarkets will use.
Thank you.
Raewyn, sorry, I was just going to jump in as well, if that's
sure.
okay.
Absolutely.
Just to build on Pierre's point, so they're not mutually exclusive, wholesale and direct supply. And what we're really asking for is for suppliers to take a good look at how they're supporting new entrants or expanding retailers, and see if they've got that balance right. And we're not expecting a solution where all products are going through wholesale, but are the products that retailers are most wanting to access, if they're not available, then we would be wondering why that is. So it's I guess it's not an all or nothing, and we are seeking a balance across both those channels.
The clarification is enormously helpful. Thank you. I'll continue to read the questions, noting that these are questions coming in from our live audience. So this one, my anonymous feedback is that this approach feels like an extremely strong reach into a free market to make it a very controlled market, i.e. structuring a market versus allowing freedoms around market positioning, almost driving or at least favouring a generic no-brand market, the consequences of which can be limited innovation and a reduction in range and options in order to meet requirements. Dare I say it, almost communist in nature. Interested in ComCom's thoughts on that view.
On the statement, well, we are tasked to increase competition in the market, and that's totally anti-communist to start with. How do we get competition is one of the main things that are constantly asked of us, is how do we get competitive priced groceries? So, if that wasn't an issue, we wouldn't be going through this discussion, but we do have people out there who can't buy a product either through wholesale or direct. And they are saying to us, how do we actually compete in a grocery market? We're also grocers, but we can't compete at all. So what the Act is trying to do is say we want more competition, and to get more competition, we need some way to achieve that. And that is what we are trying to do. So it's totally anti-communist, anti-socialist. It's pro-competition.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. If the regime has been found to not be working as intended to date, as identified by the Commission, has an interrogation taken place on the system itself to ensure we aren't being asked to fix a proposed and theoretical system that was flawed from the outset?
I think we come back here to the whole premise that there's direct supply and there's wholesale. If direct supply was working perfectly to all of these different potential supermarkets and people who want to come in, wholesale wouldn't be an issue. So let's get that clear. If direct supply was working effectively, wholesale wouldn't be as big an issue. Smaller suppliers might want to buy some off there, but we are looking at the bigger picture to ensure that we've got that competitive tension in the market. Alice, maybe you want to add something more?
Yeah, thanks, Pierre. So, I mean, I'd come back to something that Pierre says a lot, which is, you know, there is no single bullet here, a silver bullet here. And, you know, we're talking today about this aspect of the work that the Commission is doing. But Raewyn, at the start, you referenced the broader, you know, sort of landscape in terms of the Minister's focus and so on. You know, there are reasons that we have been given these tools under the Grocery Industry Competition Act, and it's because, as Pierre said, access for new entrants and expanding players to wholesale has been an issue. And, you know, our analysis has found out that in terms of pricing and range, it is still an issue. But you know, we do recognise that this is only one aspect of solving the lack of competition in the sector. So it's the one that we have been given tools to work with. So we're still advocating that there are other aspects of competition that need to be dealt with as well. So I don't want you to forget that, and we're definitely aware of not overemphasizing one particular solution over another. Is a combination of different things.
Sure, and we'll certainly be making these comments in our submission with suggestions of other options if those are obvious to us.
Yes.
I think that the sense from members might well be that this is such an entrenched market power situation that the proposal in the Act and the thinking in the Act isn't going to successfully dismantle that, and the risk of unintended consequences and costs and disruption to the market, which were comments that were made at various points as this model was suggested by in the regulatory impact statement, for example, that if that is actually true and you are trying to put in place a model that isn't going to work, that has huge risk for not just suppliers, but actually consumers and the country. And if we lose that innovation and the ability to develop new wonderful food products to enhance our exports, that's a massive disincentive for the government to go down this track. So we'll certainly be exploring all of those aspects in our submission. And we don't underestimate the difficulty of the challenge that you have to make this model work, but you can see the concern coming through. There is a comment there. Sorry, Pierre.
I would just come back, Raewyn, the fact that further regulation is the last resort, and also emphasize direct supply. You know, I haven't heard too many people comment on direct supply, but direct supply is one way of getting stock out there. It's another way to you know, engender more innovation, because you can go to smaller ones and try out products, etc. So there's a lot of other things that need to be considered, and I think direct supply shouldn't be underestimated.
Yes, and look, I think that suppliers do have decisions to make around direct supply. Some have invested very heavily in that, and we're very worried that they may lose the ability to use that. And that's certainly something you've addressed in the report based on the submissions around taking away the control of direct distribution for some companies that already use that. I think if you're not in that situation, the cost and the effort that you have to go to set up direct supply is difficult for the independent retailer, and that's what you're striking, but it's also difficult for the supplier, having a lot of different transactions to manage and deliveries and smaller size volumes all comes with cost, and that's usually why the price for smaller volume purchases goes up. So it's not apples with apples. So it is complex, and in a country where we have a really constricted and difficult infrastructure supply chain, that's not as easy in a more densely populated market either. So some of the comparisons to larger companies and markets are difficult to see being realistic for New Zealand, which is the nature of our challenge. There is a comment there around Metcash, which I know you've mentioned a few times in your responses, Pierre, that the Metcash model doesn't provide the same RP on shelf versus the major supermarket. I don't know if you want to comment whether you've looked at that in your considerations.
We've been talking to Metcash and getting more information about that. But what we're trying to do here is to say, before we delve down too much and spend too much more time on that, we can see it is working there, but let's ask the industry here, can you get this resolved and get it done? Because, I'm not saying take Metcash and duplicate Metcash here. What we're saying is our preference is a commercial solution which avoids further regulation. And that can be done through systems and working together here. So it's something that we're asking the supplier base to come up with.
And I wonder, given that's the intent of your call for views, which you're talking about now, which certainly, I guess, hasn't been that front of mind for me when I've been reading through the report, I must say. But if that is the intent, then this written submission process is a very difficult one to engage to find ideas that would work. Workshops and other mechanisms would be things that I would be very keen to explore, because then you can have an exchange of ideas rather than a competition of ideas, which is really often what a submission process ends up being, particularly with the cross submission and the publicity around it. So I wonder if you might consider some other avenues to engage. We're certainly very happy to support those. As you know, I've offered anything we can do to support the thinking. And I know you may have some restrictions on what you can do, but given the intent of what you're saying today, I think that would be worth an offline conversation to see what we could come up with. I'm aware that we've got a couple of other questions, but any comment from you first, obviously you're very welcome.
Just that in the document as well, what we're asking for from the industry is a commitment. If you look through what we've got in there, is a commitment to work towards a solution. So we're not expecting a solution in the submissions. What we are wanting is a commitment to work towards a solution, and that is why we have given a period of time so that people can work through that and come up with something that you believe is workable. And it may be just, we will supply at least pallet loads full if they pick us up, etc. Because we need to ensure that we support the new and up and coming supermarkets as well to grow.
Thank you. So the next question is there a size expectation for the wholesale sector to get to? Understanding that may help to get more competitive pricing to consumers, but in reality, it could be unlikely due to the extra layer and market size opportunity versus the rest of the world. And I guess that goes to the modelling that you might have done on that.
We don't have a specific figure in mind. However, what we are saying is that currently it is negligible in the total industry. So when you look at that, it indicates that it's not working effectively. But again, I come back to the fact that the wholesale model isn't the only thing that's in there. There's direct supply as well. It's the access to groceries, which is the key to all of this.
Thank you. I think the next one is more of a comment, but in fairness to the participant who has contributed it, I will read it out. If we were to move to the RGRs controlling the majority of the wholesale arm, this will only improve their current profits and makes them even more powerful in the market. This just strengthens the current duopoly. So I'll leave it open to you to whether you want to respond to that comment or not.
Yes, and it's something which is a concern if they control all of that. However, they're not making money on that at this point in time. So that's one thing. It's not going to increase their profitability if that's the concern. But again, if there's an alternate, Tex Edwards has come up with various alternatives of new distribution centres, etc., who can then supply to different supermarkets or even competitive supermarkets. And I suggest you take a read through his RFI as well that he put into the government on how he sees things could work.
I don't think they're public at the moment.
They should be coming out shortly, and I think Tex has, in fact, on LinkedIn and other places, actually published his. So his, I believe, is actually public already.
Okay, we'll certainly look out for that.
Raewyn, I was just going to quickly jump in on this as well and just remind that another of the bases for the Grocery Industry Competition Act regime that we're working under is around efficiency and using the scale and efficiency of the RGRs to help to initially anyway improve competition and, as Pierre says, access to grocery. So they have the DCs, they have the distribution network, and so part of this is making that accessible to a broader range of retailers.
Yes, and I think that goes to a comment that's been put on that topic. It's important to note that the RGRs have increasingly required suppliers to move from direct supply to DC supply. So many suppliers no longer have a comprehensive DSD capability. So that's in line with, I guess, the point you're making about scale as well.
So Raewyn, I think the other thing it would be good to just surface here is if your members have concerns around how they might be being directed by the RGRs or feel that pressure's being applied, we do also have a compliance and enforcement aspect to our work, and we would always welcome any indication of where that might be happening, whether it's directly or through our anonymous reporting tool, and we will follow those up.
Thank you. A couple of questions.
Yeah, sorry, just to jump in with one additional point. I guess what I think we'd also be interested in is understanding whether the current supply agreements essentially do contain any terms or conditions or raise issues which essentially detract or prevent the delivery of competitive markets. So from the supplier's perspective, because that's something, again, if we put in a wholesale code, the options how that applies can apply to RGRs, can apply to RGRs and suppliers, but essentially, that's something we could definitely look at as well.
Thank you. So a couple of questions here around, well, one question about home brands. So will retailers be required to supply their brands like PAMS if we are required to supply ours?
Again, that's down the track if further regulation gets put into place. What we're asking for at the moment is, a commercial solution. So we haven't gotten to that point yet.
I guess to go to your point about asking for voluntary commitments to do that, are you seeking that from the RGRs?
Yes, the RGRs have got that as well. And if you look at our report, it asks for both suppliers and RGRs to commit to finding a solution.
Sorry, I was specifically meaning on providing private label home brand to their competitors.
We want them, in terms of the total wholesale offering, to have a whole offering at different prices so that, some branded products are more expensive than others. So what we're looking at is the range that's in there. So yes, implicitly it is in there.
And what I'd add to that, Raewyn, is if you look at our analysis of the products that are sought out, then those own brand products are definitely in those top SKUs. And so that would be something that we would be keeping an eye on, how available are those top selling SKUs in the wholesale offer.
It's also, I must add, a double-edged sword that we've got to be careful of, that we are, that we recognise, because the more private label a supermarket sells, the more power they have, the more their brand is requested, the more pressure they can put on suppliers as well. So, we recognise that. You will note in our annual grocery report that comes out, we do touch on private label when that comes out.
Okay, we'll look out for that. Thank you. There's a question here based on the latest choice survey in Australia that had IGA as 15% more expensive than coals. So that's the same, I think, as the 15% you're referring to in New Zealand. And the question is, so what changes?
I don't know, and I haven't seen that survey, so I'm not exactly sure what that is about. Are they comparing normal prices, special prices, or anything like that? What I'm saying is when not a customer, but when a wholesale purchaser tells me there's a 15% differential between buying directly either from a supplier or off the wholesale regime, that there's a 15% differential, that equates very closely to the promotional spends that go in there. So I'm not sure exactly. I'm assuming the choice is on actual retail prices rather than wholesale prices.
Yes, we can certainly make that information available to you. I think the premise of that question is that if there's a 15% differential at wholesale and it's flowing through to retail, isn't that what you're looking to try and reduce? But that's not reducing in Australia with a bigger market. I think that's probably the point that the person is trying to make.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what those details are, but we're happy to look at that.
Thank you. Another one, I'll read it as it's written. Does the Commission really believe the retailer would provide free distribution to their competitors and not make a profit?
Well, this is a requirement per the Act. They can only recover costs. So, we monitor that and we look at that.
Okay.
And I know there could be skepticism about that as well.
Helpful to understand that.
Again, that is why direct supply is probably the solution to many of these ills.
Right, I think we've got one last question which will be making its way to the chat, but I will read it and then I think we will thank you for your additional time and let you go. So the final question that I'll ask for today is there are well-established companies in New Zealand that operate large logistics networks focused on distribution of food to smaller outlets. Has this been investigated and have they been engaged with by the Commission as a better alternative solution than strengthening the power of the RGRs? And would this drive more competition on wholesale versus RGRs?
It potentially could, and this is where I think this could be a commercial solution coming from the industry, where suppliers could say together we can, talk to X or Y to supply some of these, but that is not for us to go in and negotiate at this point in time. We're looking at, is wholesale working? Can the competitors get product at a reasonable price? But certainly, if that is an option out there, it's one I would suggest that the industry takes a close look at.
Yes, it is interesting to ask the industry to do that, I think, given the concern around anti-competitive behaviour and the lack of protection that we have as suppliers trying to negotiate some of those solutions that you're talking about. I do think we need to think about how we can work together on that, because it is a government responsibility to deliver the legislative outcomes from the legislation in a way that's reasonable for industry to participate in. We haven't got a legal requirement to deliver a solution that we're aware of. So it would be great to talk about how we can do that in a safe and constructive way, perhaps as a follow-up from this webinar. So on that constructive note, I will move to thanking you again for the second webinar in 2 days. We do really appreciate your willingness to front the industry, to take the difficult questions and answer as best as you can, and consider the thoughts of our suppliers and members and put that into the mix as we progress together through the next phases. As we've said, we will be working on our submission on behalf of suppliers, and the discussion today has been really very important to us, deepening our understanding of your intention and your openness to look at other solutions. So we do thank you for that. That has been a great benefit to us. Thank you to all of the attendees for spending time on a Friday afternoon and staying till the end of an extended call. We do appreciate your interest in this important topic, and for anyone who watches it at a later date on the recording, we hope you find it valuable. And I would like to assure you that the New Zealand Food and Grocery Council will be open to hearing from you as members. If you have thoughts that you would like to contribute into our submission, please do get in touch with me or the team and make sure that we are aware of those and can articulate those crisply and well for the Commission to put into their deliberations. So thanks again to Pierre, Alice, Laura and Mark. Really appreciate your efforts today and your time, and I will now close with a karakia. A whakarerea te tapu, kia waitea aiteara, kia turaki whakataha ai, kia turaki whakataha ai, huie takie. Restrictions are moved aside so the pathway is clear to return to everyday activities. Ka kite.